Hello, welcome to my interpretation of the astrology from Monday, March 23rd to Sunday, March 29th. So, the astrology of this week starts with a commitment that we make to ourselves that we see almost immediately grow into a decision that we have to make ourselves visible on the outside by Wednesday. And then, really, very quickly after that, Thursday into the weekend, we're going to see a creative opportunity really present itself in order for us to actively, socially integrate the commitment that we've made to ourselves. Okay. So that's what I see happening this week. Let me pull up the charts and explain to you how I arrived at this conclusion. So here we're starting on Monday. I'm recording on this Monday, and there's not so much I want to linger on today because most of the action really begins to be felt by Tuesday onward. But what I can show you is that the lunar phase that we're in right now is much closer to a first quarter sextile, which is about a 60-degree aspect. And that means that on Monday, we're starting to hone in and focus on the direction that we need to practically take over this lunar cycle. And in particular, it was the direction that got its start, well, closer to around here at the Pisces new moon that we had last week, right? Until now, the moon has been growing all the way up until this point that it is by the end of the day, EST on Monday, moon in Gemini. This is really about studying the intention that we made for ourselves at the Pisces new moon. From my interpretation, that Pisces new moon was all about restarting a dream, the last chance at really putting your all behind a dream that might have felt very difficult to actually start to commit to see work in real life. We were really having one last chance to restart that. And until today, until Monday, we've been kind of in an exploratory phase of of specifically what are going to be the actionables that we do to make this dream come true. So from Monday, we are actually figuring it out, but it is going to take from Monday into Tuesday to actually make the first decision. Okay? To make the first decision on the outside, to really have that feeling that not only you are saying the right thing, but you're acting the right thing. Okay? Tuesday, the pressure will be building not only in the moon in its phase to the sun. On Wednesday, I'll talk about the first quarter moon that will happen when the moon reaches the sign of Cancer. But what's very important on Tuesday is that the sun is getting closer and closer to the planet Saturn in the sky in the sign of Aries, which is all about you making a very, very conscious commitment to yourself. Okay? Whatever this dream was that you reseated at, last week, this 28-degree Pisces new moon, now it has become something tangible through your body alone. As the moon has been growing, we have been, again, realizing the options we have. And Wednesday, again, is the day to deepen in the study, in the strategy, in the honing down on what the path is going to be. And that in and of itself is the lunar phase between the moon and the sun. But you couple that with the fact that the sun is about to make its conjunction to Saturn on Tuesday. And this degree difference, which is only 10 minutes, less than 1 degree, that means we are really feeling the urge, the pressure to condense ourselves into one thing. Saturn is all about crystallization, condensation, the condensing of what used to be many, many things into one thing. It's like diamond, making a diamond, like, what is it, coal into a diamond? Is that what it is? Charcoal? Like, you really have to compress it. And that's what Saturn is doing with us and doing with our individuality, doing with our free will right now. And it just so happens that it's at this point of the lunar phase where on Tuesday, we are really honing in. We are really it's a great time to be writing and journaling and planning and communicating with other people. It's not going to be till Wednesday where we feel the need to actually express something very, very vulnerable to make a decision. It might not feel like the biggest deal in the world. Lunar transits are rarely, the biggest deal in the world. But the reason I'm emphasizing this is just because the sun is so close to Saturn at this point. By the end of the day on Wednesday, the sun will have passed Saturn. The moon will even have passed its first quarter square to the sun. The first quarter square happens when the moon is in the same modality as the sun, that modality that is 90 degrees away. So one quarter of the zodiac away, in this case from Aries, 90 degrees is 5 degrees of Cancer. So earlier in the day on Wednesday, the 25th, we'll have that first quarter moon. And so earlier in the day, we will realize we need to basically kick a door down and say, this is what's going on. It does feel vulnerable. And the first quarter moon doesn't need you to change your entire life. It needs you to just start changing your life. So you start by saying something vulnerable, maybe to your closest friends or your closest family, and say, hey, I've actually been thinking about doing this thing again. In this case, because I do think that Pisces new moon is us restarting something, not brand new, but in this case, it's like, hey, I'm going to double down on this again. And it's kind of vulnerable for me to do that because it hasn't been working in the past, but I feel good about it this time. I feel like there's something still there for me to push and to explore. And I say I feel good because the moon is going to be applying to Jupiter at that time. This is just an immense amount of emotional wisdom that I think we've been gaining through the Jupiter through Cancer transit over this last year now. And the moon will also at this time be making a trine to Mercury, eventually in the day after trine to Mars. Like there's a lot of opportunity that comes from really sharing and expanding the decision, the commitment that you are making to yourself at this time, sharing that with with someone in your family, Cancer, someone very close to you, someone you can be vulnerable with, someone you know will help you grow. Because, and here's where I want to start bringing in the full moon in Libra. This is halfway between Aries and Libra. On April 1st, we're going to have a full moon in the sign of Libra. And in order to get to that full moon is really, we have to do all the work that we're doing this week to really commit to who we are, to figure out a way to kick the door down and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to pursue. I want to feel like I'm going to be able to grow alongside people I care about. And I also want to support your individual growth, right? Cancer, in a sense, is halfway between Aries and Libra. That family, you could say, is halfway between me and you, right? Like it's not me being so selfish. It's not me being completely interdependent on someone else. It's the balance. It's we're all working in harmony with each other. We are growing. We are figuring out what we want, what makes us feel happy, what our personal preferences are, which is Libra. And we are letting ourselves just act, which is Aries. We are following our own personal truth. So the movement this week, and I'll keep going into the weekend, but the movement this week is very much so this Wednesday. We've got a big kind of emotional decision to make that's coming out of this commitment that we're making to ourselves. Okay, so the moon will have traveled all this way in the lunar cycle to this first quarter square, which again is 1/4 of the way through the entire lunar cycle. Okay, so what happens next? We see that on Thursday, by the end of the day of Thursday, the moon, sorry if this is still there, the moon is still in the sign of Cancer. So we're still deepening basically in the good feelings, honestly, that I think will come out of making a brave decision at that first quarter square on Wednesday, making a brave decision to really stand up for yourself. That first quarter square is not about backing down. It's about saying, I need to act in life. And in Cancer, it's saying I need to emotionally act. I need to be vulnerable. I need to let my vulnerability be seen, actually, which is very difficult for a Cancer moon. But what's being seen is this Aries sun. Okay, so into Thursday, I think we might still be reeling a little bit from whatever decision we've made on Wednesday, but there's so much emotional capacity, so much emotional expansion that will come on Thursday thanks to that decision. And I read that also just because of the trine the moon is making to Mars at that time. Moon, I mean, this is Pisces down here. Mars and Pisces taking action on our faith. Moon in Cancer, moon at home in Cancer on this day of Thursday says we know what we need to do. Essentially, there's not only we know what we need to do, but there's going to be an opportunity that feels safe enough for us emotionally to do it. And any pressure we're feeling is just in this newness of how we are committing to ourselves, how we are letting ourselves be a creative expression, sun, of whatever commitment we have newly made to ourselves, and letting the emotions come and go, letting the emotions rise through this new decision that we've made on Wednesday. I do see that it might be nice on Thursday to kind of revel emotionally in this. The emotional opportunities, the emotional coherence and harmony will be present on Thursday. And then what happens is into the weekend gets interesting because the moon will move into the sign of Leo, which is much more expressive, much more creative, much more even external than the moon in Cancer as it was here. So we're shifting by the end of the day on Friday. In this weekend, we're starting with the trine, the first quarter trine between the sun and the moon. And the difference is this is a very harmonious aspect. This is the first aspect of outer harmony that we see in the lunar cycle. After we made this big decision, suddenly we get an opportunity to seed, or to beyond seeding, actually, we get an opportunity to see our intention actually work out in the world. That's the logic of a first quarter square. We have our first social opportunity to make this happen. And what is that social opportunity? Well, it's very much so between the fire signs, right? We have Aries and Leo. This is about who you are, holding the torch of your inner flame, your inner self, and then you being able to basically put on a show for anyone outside of you. You being able to lead creatively, share from your heart. It's not just the inner fire that you have, it's the inner warmth. That Leo is what makes the Aries fire very warm, personable. We've been through Cancer where we know where we come from with Cancer. We know what we are emotionally relying on. And there is an opportunity, a creative fire opportunity that's going to come by this weekend. And that's what I'm mostly really seeing. I haven't even touched at all on Pluto yet, which is actually a very big deal this week. But because the moon will be opposing Pluto come Friday, maybe it's a good time to tap in to explain, okay, what's happening with Pluto this whole week, actually. What's happening with Pluto? Well, it awakened me to remember to tell you in this moment because the moon in Leo makes an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. But even before the moon moves into Leo later this week on Friday, what's happening is these two planets, these two planets, the sun and Saturn, which I've been harping on about this whole week as that kind of baseline understanding of who you're committing to in your deepest inner self, they are getting this beautiful boost from Pluto. This is, again, a 60-degree sextile. We see basically as the sun crosses Saturn, it itself will exact a 60-degree sextile to Pluto. And then Saturn itself will exact a 60-degree sextile to Pluto on Saturday. And it's basically this whole week, you could essentially say that this sextile between Saturn's sun and Pluto is coming into super sharp focus. But what does that actually look like? Okay. That looks like, if you remember earlier this week when I talked about the sextile, the 60-degree sextile between the sun and the moon, any 60-degree sextile is the beginning, still at the beginning of any phase between two planets, or like a phase, astrological phase. And this phase says that we are choosing and we are deepening. And in essence, we are like studying and preparing something before we need to make a decision at the first quarter square. And so this whole period of the 60-degree sextile, basically between 60 degrees and I'd say, 75 degrees, that's the period where you're really honing in and you're studying your stuff because you've made a decision and you need to prepare before you're going to go to the outside world and say, hey, this is the decision I've made. You need to understand why intuitively you believe this is the decision that you're supposed to make. You need to understand it so that when you go to the world, you have strength, you have an inner strength. You're not going to feel afraid of the outer world telling you that your intuition was wrong. Okay. That's the logic of a 60-degree square. That's what's happening between both Sun and Saturn with Pluto. And this is a slower, especially with Saturn, this is a phase that'll last a while. Whereas the Sun and the Moon, it happens pretty quickly, right? Only over a few days. This phase will last a little bit longer. Okay. When the Sun goes into Taurus, we'll have that first quarter square with the Sun Pluto, but that's a little different than what's going on here with Saturn. So let me just say one more thing, which is that Pluto in Aquarius is killing how we use our mind. Pluto in Aquarius is killing how we've used the social spheres that we've been a part of, the intellect in our brain, how we've been relying on our brain to tell us who we are. And we've realized that. How many clients I've had recently who have been sharing that they realize they've done enough work of processing trauma over the last 10 years and are now in a place where they're ready to just start living their lives based on what they want, what's true for them, which is basically spot on. Saturn in Aries, I'm committing to myself in this present moment, and I'm going to use my brain, which is an Aquarian feature. I'm going to use the power of my brain, Pluto. The power and death are kind of the same thing. You need to totally kill off how you've been doing things in the past with Pluto in Aquarius, where it's been unbalanced, where you've been using a neural network that's totally not who you are anymore. You need to create a neural network, and that's a very Aquarian. You just realize the power of your own brain, and the power of your own commitment to yourself. These are two archetypes. Aquarius and Aries are a natural sextile to each other, a natural 60-degree sextile. So the personal self in Aries is actually very harmonious with this idea of what the larger archetype of Aquarius, which is about personal liberation, liberating from who you think you are, which makes sense, right? If you're liberating from who you have thought you were, then the Aries present moment of who you are right here, right now, deepening in that, committing to that, should, by right, help you to understand your own power more and more with Pluto in Aquarius. Okay, so that's coming so sharply into focus this week as even that first quarter square happens. This emotional decision we're making, Pluto is involved at this time, which is saying the power is in our brain. The power is in how we are holding our perspective on life. It's never external to us. But what we realize with Pluto and Aquarius is it's in our logic system, it's in our brain, it's in how that fractalizes out into the social spheres that we choose to be with, choose to think with, what we use our brain for, essentially. Okay, so that's going to be happening all week, but I think it's going to come up. We're going to see that something. This is just such an interesting transit on Friday because we have that powerful trine between the Sun and the Moon, which is a very fiery, creative opportunity. And we have this opposition from Pluto to the Moon, which says like we can see very, very clearly the destruction, the change that's going on in our own brain. We can see very clearly how us committing to who we are right now is helping us to be more creative in our own bodies. And creative socially, sharing that from a bigger place, and ultimately making this dream that we seeded with Pisces new moon, making that dream a reality. Okay, so let's go in over the weekend. Pretty much over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I see the same thing playing out because the moon remains in Leo. It will make a square eventually on Sunday to Uranus. I'm not too concerned. Like, that's fine. That's just a shift. It's just another change. I'm okay with it. We can see Venus is approaching the end of her time in Taurus, which means what we are open to is like we're finally reaching the end of something we needed to learn within this more sensory acceptance of this Aries area, which is Taurus. And eventually next week it's going to move into Taurus. Sorry, sensory acceptance of this Aries area, which is our self. And eventually in a few days it's going to move into Taurus, which will be just much more physical, sensory, material. And there'll be less focus on who we are, being a little bit more navel gazy. That's going to start to shift. But this is really the last week where all of this Aries focus is so, so, so important, magnified by the sextile to Pluto, magnified by the first quarter square, and then the first quarter trine. I mean, this is just so much waxing energy this week. This full moon is going to happen on Wednesday of next week. And it it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. Okay. What I didn't say is Venus makes a conjunction to Chiron on Thursday. So this same day, I think the reason I didn't end up saying it on that day was because I'm not too worried about it. I think it'll be a much larger healing aspect for maybe a chronic sense of woundedness in ourself that we're healing. Now I see Chiron in a much more healed way because it's so far into Aries. It's almost finished with Aries, at least for a few months. It'll be in Taurus this year. It will go back into Aries, but I think we are really matured in this Chiron area we have. And Venus being there just is a balm in a way, and in the same way that it's a balm for anything to be in the sign of Cancer. And so I think, that's important, but Venus will go through that this week, conjuncting Chiron. And so let's look at this final day of Sunday. Again, I don't see so much specifics that I want to hone in on other than everything I've said. It's just the last few hours of the day, basically the second half of the day, the moon will have moved into the sign of Virgo. And so we'll have this big opportunity in the day, like early in the day, like still early in the day, we'll be maybe reeling from a big creative opportunity that happened with the trine. And then once the moon moves into Virgo, we're going to want to order it. We're going to want to make sense of it. We're going to want to systematize it. And then at some point into next week, the moon will hit the south node and there'll be something that feels a little bit more heavy, a little bit more weighty about whatever organizing that we're doing. But I'll talk about that next week. Sunday, it's not all just this creative thing, but I do think we will be reeling and wanting to kind of organize ourselves around whatever this new thing going on is. So, alrighty, that is what I have for now. Stop sharing. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Check out my availability. I'm not sure if it'll be updated just yet for personal readings. I'm working on workshops. I'm working on putting on workshops in many different areas, and just check out, keep updated if you like the way that I interpret charts. Basically, any workshop that I do will just be teaching you how to see the astrology in specific areas of your life. Where I'm going to be starting is in a creative practice, in like let's say a painting practice or a drawing practice or a writing, collaging practice. I find any wound of self-expression, any inferiority, or like any complexes around you creating your like what you want to, right? Just choosing a color you like and just drawing with it, making a painting because you like how it feels. Any of this, like Taurus or especially the Leo stuff, is so, so important. And that's kind of where I'm gravitated to focus on. So if you are an artist, either professionally or hobby, if you do a collage practice, if you are a writer or a singer or a dancer and you have a creative process that you recognize has a pattern to it, and yet you still feel like all artists do, you hit blocks or you're stifled. The chart and the chart dynamics can actually show you exactly where that block might show up, and it's like the logic of a square. You just have to push through. And when you recognize that that block isn't actually there to stop you, it's there to push you forward, then it just becomes clockwork. It becomes like going to the gym, and then you start getting stronger, and it's a really empowering feeling. And so astrology can do that and can show you. And I want you to understand how to do that for yourself. I want you to understand the logic of your own chart. I want you to be able to pinpoint each piece, each like where each piece of where the pinball machine goes. Oh, bing, 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 bing. Like that's kind of how it is. So hope that makes sense. If you are an artist of any nature and interested in something like that, let me know below. I have a workshop that's planned for this weekend, the 20th and the 29th. Not sure if it'll go off as planned, but that's all. Side note, this Mercury retrograde stationing has been really crazy. I don't know if you have been feeling it. It's somehow as though the stationing direct of Mercury retrograde has been more of a Mercury retrograde than the actual Mercury retrograde period was. That's been new for me. But yeah, that's all I have. Let me know how things have been going and have a lovely week ahead.